So, even from the shackles of death, my old enemy pursues me. You're too late, Fortescue. Already my army has risen from the grave. You will never leave this necropolis.
It's time to go back to 1998 and rise from the dead as we adventure through the lands of Gallowmere on our epic journey to defeat the evil Zarok. For real this time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, I'm Josh Strife-Hayes, and today we're ripping our own arm off and using the gooey end as a club to smack the undead back to re-dead in the classic PlayStation 1 platform adventure, Medieval. I'll be finishing the whole game, finding the hidden chalices and analysing all the mechanics before asking the simple question, Medieval, was it any good? As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive. More information on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. Warning, this video does contain flashing strobe effects. I'll warn you again just before they happen. Medieval. Even if you've not played the full game, you've likely played the demo. Like most PlayStation 1 games, it featured on a playable demo disc, physical discs given away with magazines or special promotions. What's interesting about Medieval, however, is quite how many demos Medieval was on. PlayStation Demo Disc 1 version 7, European Demo 38 and 103, German Action Demo 11, Sampler Disc Volume 9, and then special promotional demos from Pizza Hut and Toys R Us. In fact, Medieval has appeared on 11 different demo discs. Next to such iconic games as Metal Gear Solid, Tomb Raider 2 and 3, Crash Bandicoot Warped, and Gran Turismo. It even got 3 country-exclusive demo discs, an extensive making-of demo in the UK, a longer playable section in the US, and a behind-the-scenes development demo in France. So even if you never owned the full game, chances are you have played the first few levels. The marketing budget for Medieval was clearly extremely high, and yet it didn't actually sell all that well. It did receive the PlayStation Platinum distinction in 1999, meaning it sold at least 400,000 copies in Europe, but it does not appear in the list of best-selling PS1 games, meaning it likely sold under 1 million total copies. It's no doubt a cult classic though, and was popular enough to see a remaster in 2019 for the PlayStation 4, updating the original game with shiny new graphics. However, the remaster met with lukewarm reviews, with Metro Game Central saying it was loyal to a fault, with gameplay and design mechanics that were barely acceptable 21 years ago, let alone now. The remaster itself actually contains the entire PlayStation 1 original game as a secret unlockable Easter egg. So while I'm aware the remaster exists, for this video I'll be playing the original and seeing if it was, for the time, any good. We load it up and get the intro text crawl.
In a time long ago, there lived in the kingdom of Gallowmere a sorcerer named Zarok. This arrogant, pitiless man hated his fellow citizens for their simple and peaceful ways. So he raised an army of demons and set out to take the realm for his own. The king's champion, Sir Daniel Fortescue, led the militia into battle against this unholy horde. Songs are still sung of how he spearheaded the charge deep into the accursed multitude, how demons fell before him like wheat before the scythe, and how at last, though mortally wounded, he destroyed the sorcerer utterly.
You are Sir Daniel Fortescue, long-dead knight and hero of Gallowmere. Many years ago, you bravely led a charge against the evil sorcerer Zarok, striking him down in combat and saving the land from his evil magic. From that day on, you were worshipped as a hero and have since become a legend, except that's not actually what happened. In reality, you were killed by an arrow to the eye in the very first charge. You did basically nothing. History has made you a hero based on misremembering the battle. And now Zarok has returned. He's used his evil magic to steal the souls from the people of Gallowmere, turning them into mindless ghouls, and he's raised the dead to become his zombie army. In raising the dead, however, he inadvertently also raised you, and now it's your chance to redeem yourself, to actually stop Zarok for real this time, and to live up to the legend you already wrongfully have. I really like this plot. It's a parody of the Chosen One trope. Everyone mistakenly thinks you are the Chosen One based on an incorrect myth, and in reality you're just very unlucky. Now let's get pedantic. Listen to the scream sound effect when Daniel gets hit in the eye by an arrow. I'll play that back a bit louder. Really listen. That is the same death screen used by the soldiers in the real-time strategy game Command & Conquer.
Unit lost.
Yes, sir.
In fact, it's the same scream used in Doom when you die and end up with less than minus 50 HP.
Here's a bit of an obscure death scream which only plays when you die and end up with less than minus 50 health. It's an edited stock scream.
This is essentially the Wilhelm scream of video games. You will hear it everywhere, and it's a developer in-joke. A fly through the graveyard menu to set the tone, and then we begin in Dan's crypt. This is a safe training level. A gargoyle face on the wall explains the situation to us, and when Dan replies,
"It has risen again, Sir Daniel Fortescue. See? The hero of Gallowmere who fell at the first charge. The fog of war and the shrouds of time conspire to turn the arrow fodder into the saviour of the day. But we knows better."
I love that. You're wearing a helmet and you have no jaw, so of course your voice would be muffled. You know, by removing an identifiable voice from the character, you're essentially allowing the player to insert themselves into the role and make it super easy to translate into any language. Daniel Fortescue is enough of a defined character to be interesting to play as, but also just blank enough to be mysterious, and this is why he has endured so well. We pick up our sword and get told to live up to our legend, so let's get playing. Medieval is a third-person platforming game. You control Daniel with the D-pad, press to walk, double tap to run. While the analog DualShock was supported, the D-pad was the focus, and as we'll see later, also kind of needed for some of the trickier levels. Press X to attack or hold square for your weapon's special move. We'll look at combat later. Circle jumps and triangle holds up your shield. L2 and R2 spin the camera round left and right, and holding both L2 and R2 lets you look around manually, but only in certain places. The camera changes from freeform 3D to locked angles in certain rooms. In fact, camera issues will be one of the things we come back to repeatedly. Around the levels you'll find these plinths with books on them. They're a mix of lore and hints. Read them by pressing X. Sometimes a tad awkward because if you have a ranged weapon equipped, X also fires. So if you're stood at the wrong place, instead of reading the book, you'll just waste some ammo. Every level follows the same basic design principle. Find these floating coloured runestones and then put them into the correct locks to progress. There are 5 runestones: Chaos, Star, Earth, Moon and Time. And despite having cool names, they don't actually do anything other than unlock doors. Dan's crypt lets us get to grips with the basics. You'll find some piles of coins lying around. These are used to buy items from the vendor gargoyles we'll find later. You'll also find some throwing knives. Medieval has a total of 15 different weapons, from the standard longsword to a magical sword, from a standard longbow to a magical bow, from small throwing knives to actual lightning. You've also got 3 levels of shield: copper, silver and gold. Pressing select brings up the item menu, weapons in the right hand, shields in the left. Along with the basic attack, most weapons have an alternative attack. We'll look at these as we find them. The starter sword slices forward in a triple combo, and the special charges up a 360 spin, which is much more powerful. Now you'll notice one of the walls in the crypt is different. Very clearly a secret, but we can't access it yet, and this is an important part of Medieval's design: backtracking. As you progress, you'll unlock new skills and new weapons, which will allow you to return to older levels and unlock new paths and find the hidden secrets. Unfortunately, as we'll also see, it's not a system that's explored as deeply as it should be. At the end of every level, you'll find a trail of green sparkles. This is the trail of destruction left by Zarok, the green magical energy. We're following it to track him down, and I like this, because it's giving an in-story reason for why we leave a level at each point. We're following residual magical energy. However, this will also become an issue later when the game kind of forgets that it set this up. Out of the crypt and onto the map screen. Medieval has 22 levels connected via an overworld map, and while it's mostly linear, there are a few branching paths, and instead of a line showing connections between places, you've got this 8-way directional arrow around your icon and have to remember where leads where. Onto the graveyard. The level is shown in all the adverts and featured on every demo disc and probably the most iconic. This is the one you remember. You'll notice the design of everything, from Daniel himself to the zombie movements to the graveyard fences, is just a little bit exaggerated, a bit stylized. This is because during the early development, Medieval was described as Ghouls and Goblins meets Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, meaning they wanted a very difficult platformer with a more eclectic, eccentric style. And while graphics fade, style endures, and this style, especially of Daniel, has aged rather well. Specifically the iconography of the two-tone shield face on the copper shield, which essentially became the symbol of Medieval. While the level select screen has a map, the levels themselves do not, and this is fine in the earlier linear levels, but will become an issue when you're trying to remember your way through a town or that goddamn ant's cave. So combat. Mash X to hit enemies, and if you're standing directly in front of an enemy, they are not currently hitting you, and you've prayed to the correct god and all the stars have aligned, you will hit them. Combat is very much a game of spam. There's not much subtlety or nuance here, just mash X. Or hold down square and do spinning attacks everywhere. The spinning attack is much more powerful, so you've got no reason not to do this. You'll find that enemies, however, have no issue hitting you, while your attacks can travel harmlessly through them. Holding triangle blocks, and your current shield will lose endurance points until it breaks. Holding triangle also ducks down, meaning blocking and ducking over higher attacks is the same button, which does get a bit confusing later. My main issue here is the button mapping. If you want combat to be a series of block, attack, don't map these to triangle and X, two buttons which are not easy to press one after the other in quick succession. Your life is shown at the top. It's the green bar with 300 points. When you are hurt, you can find these life fonts, stand in them to refill health, or find these small green potions around the level. If your health is full, any excess healing from a font or a potion will go to filling up your large reserve life bottles. These large life bottles essentially work as your continues. You find more as you go. When you die, you'll drink one large bottle and resurrect where you are. You don't lose the bottle, but it does get emptied. So finding a font or a small health potion to refill these after you've died is always a good thing. There are no checkpoints in Medieval in any levels, so these large life bottles are the only way of giving yourself more attempts at the difficult bits. So combat is a bit awkward and not always solid. There is a kind of lock-on system, but it doesn't work the way you'd expect, and using it is more trouble than it's worth. Check this out. Melee weapons have no lock-on. You just swing and hope to hit. Range weapons do have a sort of soft lock-on. When wielding a range weapon, you'll get this green sparkle around you, and it will dash to the nearest in-range enemy. And all of your ranged attacks will now go toward them. This won't mean you'll always hit. Your attacks don't track, and enemies can dodge. Pressing L1 switches the lock-on sparkle to anything else in range. Holding R1, however, is where the control issues really become obvious. R1 locks Daniel to his current facing, and forward and backwards now track and left and right strafe. However, Daniel now moves relative to the camera's position, not his own body. Here's an example. If the camera is behind Daniel and you hold R1 to lock yourself, pressing forward will now move you forward, but if the camera is in front of Daniel, pressing forward now moves Daniel backward, because it's forward relative to the camera's viewpoint. This means if you're holding R1 and the camera is turning to face enemies, or you are manually spinning the camera, the direction your D-pad moves Daniel is constantly changing. You could want Daniel to move to his right and press right, but then he's moving left or backwards because the camera is changing what direction right on the D-pad relates to. Basically, don't use the R1 strafe lock. It's just not worth it. We slap this statue, it spins round and opens a gate. There's a lot of scenery interaction in Medieval, but most instances are one-off uses, not consistent mechanics, and this will become an issue later. If we go through the gate, we find the chalice. Every level has a hidden chalice. Defeating enemies fills the chalice, and when it's full, you can pick it up from wherever it is. If you finish a level after collecting a full chalice, instead of being thrown to the map screen, you'll be taken to the Hall of Heroes.
Welcome to the Hall of Heroes, where the bravest warriors from history spend eternity, feasting, singing, and arm wrestling. If they think you're worthy enough, you may be able to persuade them to give you a new weapon.
The Hall of Heroes is a collection of statues of legendary heroes. You, of course, aren't among them. Every chalice you find lets you interact with a hero and unlock a weapon. Now, most of these heroes have a connection to Daniel Fortescue from his past. They were either your lieutenants or your friends in the original fight against Zarok. Every interaction unlocks something new, sometimes weapons, sometimes coins, sometimes a large life pot. The order you unlock things in is set. All of the statues are voiced and the voice acting is questionable at best. We'll hear some very strange accents later. Along with the chalice weapons, you'll find stone gargoyle heads around most levels. These are vendors. They will repair your shields, enchant the most powerful melee weapons, and sell ammo for any ranged weapon that you've unlocked. Halfway through the graveyard level is a large locked gate, the path to the living world. We're told the stained glass demon has the key, and they can be found at the mausoleum. Nice. Does this mean we get an item and then return here? Well, yes, kind of, but also no, not really. It's done in a very strange way. We take down the zombies, unlock all the room gates, and the graveyard is done. The first Hall of Heroes weapon is a crossbow. On to Cemetery Hill. Zarok is on top of the hill, he animates some statues, and they spit giant boulders down, so now we've got a little dodging the obstacles thing going on up this path. Sometimes you'll find chests with skulls on them. These are traps, but they can still be useful, like exploding and harming nearby enemies. Climbing the boulder mountain really starts to highlight how fiddly the controls are. Jumping over isn't always responsive, and climbing up the small step cutouts takes more jumps than it really should. Reach the top and onto the mausoleum. The levels in Medieval are very short. The difficulty isn't the length, but the high chance of failure when swarmed with enemies, starting bosses on low health, and the precision that puzzles and platforming require later in the game. The mausoleum gets us the first mechanically useful weapon, the club. The main attack smashes it on the floor, and the secondary just holds it out like a stick. The club is the only weapon with durability. Every time you hit the floor, the scenery, or an enemy, the club takes damage and will eventually break. Now, we can't open these gates, but we have seen imps bursting through the flagstones on the floor, and the club can hit the floor. So we smash a few open. This is a nice touch, using weapon choice to affect platforming progression. We can even use the club to break the glass panes and then clear the shards of glass traps on the floor. And when we get this rune, the floor begins to collapse and we have to sprint away. The mausoleum is a really dense package of mechanics and scenery interaction set pieces. And then the thieving imp enemies appear. One of the most annoying enemies in gaming history. These imps steal whatever weapon you are using and run off with it. So I actually get my basic sword stolen. And when you have no weapons, you are forced to pull your own arm out of its socket and use it as a rather ineffective club. You can also throw your arm as a ranged weapon. I like the fact they've given you a default weapon. I like the joke of it being your own arm, but I dislike how using your own arm means you now can't use a shield, because you're using that arm as a weapon. Removing offensive power from the player is fine, but removing defensive at the same time makes us suddenly feel very, very vulnerable. So how do you get your stolen stuff back? Well, the merchant gargoyles will sell it back to you under the second-hand goods heading, and it costs more than I have, so I'm stuck with my own arm for a little bit. Even more mechanics. Push the flaming block along the track until it melts the frozen heart. This is the trapped spirit of the stained glass demon, and we need it freed so we can kill it to take the key to leave the graveyard. This leads to the stained glass demon fight, which is honestly really good. In fact, it's probably the best boss fight in the game. Boss fights lock the camera into a single position with limited pan, and each boss has a mechanic you need to figure out while dodging one or two attacks. The stained glass demon is only weak when his heart is exposed, so jump over the fan of glass shards and run away from the machine gun attack while waiting for the heart to be exposed. I like this fight. It's visually striking, the music is great, the mechanics are understandable yet dangerous enough to keep you engaged, and with the demon down, we grab the key, and now, a bit of an issue. We've got the key that we need to go back to the graveyard, so how do you think we do this? Surely we just use the map to travel to the original graveyard and go through the now unlockable gate? Well, yes, but also no. You actually go to a new level called Return to the Graveyard, which is exactly the same as the original graveyard level, but in reverse, and you can unlock the gate. But you can't unlock the gate if you go to the original graveyard level, despite the fact it's the same gate. Why not just have the player go to the same level they know to enhance that feeling of familiarity leading to progression? Why have a whole new identical level? Here's another issue. Both ammo and life carry over from level to level. So if you end with low life, say after a boss battle, you are starting with low life, and this will have a major gameplay impact on the final level. Run across this bridge, it collapses, and we drown. If you die with no life pots, it's game over. Hope you saved the game because you are flung back to the menu screen. I know this is a thing that old games did, but why? If a player saved before the level, they're just going to reload the save and try again. You're not adding any gameplay, you're just extending the time between gameplay attempts with what is effectively clerical work. If the player didn't save the game, you're not punishing them for failing, you're punishing them for not saving. If losing lives takes you to the menu and then the player just reloads and tries again, let them try again without the pointless routine of death, menu, load, save, try again. Here's a nice platforming touch. If you veer too close to an edge, you don't run straight off. You do a little stumble animation, and this lets you correct yourself and not fall. It's a nice touch warning the player before they accidentally throw themselves to their death. Into the catacomb tunnels. Now the camera doesn't work too well in tight spaces. You can't swing it round freely, you can't manually look, and you've got almost unavoidable enemies dropped directly in front of you who hit for big damage. Medieval is a tough game, and it rewards quick thinking and avoiding damage much more than standing and fighting. At least not until you get the overpowered magic sword later. To leave the graveyard, we need to fight the Graveyard Guardians, another boss. And this is the moment many children would quit, because this boss is hard. The Graveyard Guardians are two dogs who roam around and only become solid when they charge in for an attack, and you need to dodge the attack and hit them for that brief window of solid form. Now I'm out of ammo, so I'm doing this with my arm, and it takes a while. Eventually you do start to get the rhythm down, small dodge, attack, jump, and this is an interesting design touch. Medieval does have moments of tight design, where small choices can result in big rewards, moments your skill as a player can elevate you to that feeling of awesome, masterful dominance of battle, moments you win because you are good. And then you've got other moments where you win mostly because you can spam weapons and have enough health to survive the inevitable damage. It walks that fine line between respects skill and requires luck. Beating the Graveyard Guardians gets us the dash attack. Run, press triangle, and you'll charge forward with your shield. Out of the graveyard we get our first branching path, Enchanted Earth or Scarecrow Fields. I go for Enchanted Earth first, and I didn't realise until later, but this was a mistake. You need an item to progress through this level, and I don't have this item. I can't even get this level's chalice because that too needs the item. In fact, all I'm going to get from this level is hurt. So while the game doesn't force you to attempt it in a linear way, you can only actually make progress if you do complete it in a certain order. This level is actually substantially harder as well. You've got poison-spitting frogs, some angry flowers, and then this platform section, which brings me to a giant bird nest, and you need to push and roll the eggs off the side while avoiding the swooping claws of the bird itself. And at the end of the level, I'm told I need the Shadow Artifact to unlock an ancient tomb full of demons, so we'll be coming back here later. Into the Scarecrow Fields. A sign warns us that some enemies are not worth the effort it takes to kill, so we're best off running away. So you're teaching the player on this map from the very start, avoiding is better than confronting. Which is fine for the first bit. You avoid some mindless farmers and then some angry scarecrows, but then you get trapped in an enclosure with a giant metal robot and you have to fight it. I find it quite strange you have a level that's clearly trying to teach you about the benefits of running away, which then forces you to fight something bigger than you. The early levels in platformers, by design, often try to introduce the players to themes and mechanics before combining them later in the game. This feels contradictory. To beat the metal machine, hit its head with ranged weapons, then run between its legs and shoot the driver. I end up hiding from it by just cowering in the corner. But then you have to fight a second one, and that one has a spin round attack which hits you in the corner, so your strategy becomes useless. I like this. Increased mechanics as you encounter an enemy repeatedly. And now the first encounter of the Snake Spirit. We are told there's a mystical evil snake trapped somewhere, but if we free it, it will fight for us. So we do. And it's pretty great. It's a bit random to encounter it on a farm, but it's a solid companion for a while. If you stray too far into the cornfield, you die. We get told there's a corn cutting machine in the barn, but it's missing a piece, so we'll have to find that and return. From avoiding enemies and then fighting robots to multiple circular danger rooms, a rolling millstone that you need to duck under, and then some logs and blades that you need to jump over, and then a triple blade with jumping bits. This is definitely the dangerous platforming bit, and it's fun. But the increased camera distance almost makes it feel like a different game. Whenever you reach a platforming bit, the camera zooms out so you can take in the whole puzzle. And whenever you reach a combat bit, the camera zooms in so you can fight. And while it does indeed make those specific situations easier to deal with, it does give Medieval two very distinct feelings. Medieval sometimes feels like a platformer with fighting added, and sometimes a fighter with platforming added. But it swings between the two like a pendulum, and it doesn't always manage to tie the strengths of those two feelings together. On to Pumpkin Gorge and more tunnel combat. Close-in cameras in action games don't work when the action is mostly spamming. Medieval is at its best with a medium-distance camera in a more open environment. The club is, however, earning its keep and proves that stun-locking enemies with a smash attack is the best combat tactic in every situation. Here's another example of a mechanical idea used once. You fall into this grinder, and to get out you have to run around and raise the disc like a corkscrew. This is a lovely touch, and it won't ever be used again. Medieval really does feel like a collection of platforming ideas and mechanics, each of them interesting in their own right, which never really get brought together to enhance the others. Like these mushrooms raising and letting us jump higher. Interesting idea, used in a very simple way. There's potential here, but it feels quickly moved on from. One design aspect I do like is when the camera is in an open space and you have space to move around, the gameplay feels chaotic but not uncontrolled. There's a lot going on, but you still have a very nice sense of agency over Daniel. Run forward to grab this item and oh no, it's a trap! Rising into the air on an enemy vine. And now we have to fight off smaller vines to lower the main one so it becomes low enough to jump onto and grab the item. Interesting. Unfortunately, this nice design is another one-off mechanic. You've just had raising a floor by running on it, and now you've had lowering a vine by fighting around it. A platform-based challenge and then a combat-based challenge. Both of them individually fun, but both immediately forgotten. You could have combined them. Have the player run on a platform to raise them high enough to jump to hit enemies, which lowers something else. Mix the design you've got. Rocks now fall to block your path, and you need a club to break them, and my club has died. Now, clubs do respawn from level to level, but if there's no club on the level at all, you need to collect one from another level and then backtrack to this map. Here's a nice touch. At the end of every level there's a talking gargoyle statue, and they are short intros to what you can expect from the next level.
All bow down before the master of the vegetable patch, the prize-winning plant who can summon an army of cabbage with a wave of his noble tendril. He's delicious, he's nutritious, he's Zarok's secret recipe, he's the Pumpkin King.
Now an issue with grinding. Medieval is not an RPG, so really shouldn't have grindy gameplay, but you can replay the intro level, Dan's Crypt, as much as you want. You'll always find gold and 100 throwing daggers, there are no enemies, and it takes about 20 seconds to speedrun. This means you can repeatedly farm this level between every other level for gold and weapons. You'll always be able to refill your stock of throwing knives to 200 in about 60 seconds. Next up, the Pumpkin Serpent, another boss level. Smash 8 pods to summon the Pumpkin King. Your main issue here is being pinned into corners by swarms of pumpkin enemies and hanging aggressive vines. I'm realising my damage is quite low. I don't have enough gold to buy my own sword back yet, and the club is limited use, so I return to earlier levels for those chalices. I need to get some more weapons. Beating old levels does let you see how much skill you've gained. Slow progression, especially if the game constantly rises to match your skill level, sometimes feels like no progression. So returning to earlier challenges and dominating them is a lovely way to see how you've increased. This chalice gets me a life bottle. It's not a weapon, but I'll take it. Hey, with my new dash attack, I can bash through the wall in the opening crypt and find even more treasure. And doing this gets me the green tick on the map screen. Levels on the map screen have two icons. A chalice, showing you've collected the chalice reward from the Hall of Heroes for that level, and a green tick, showing you've found all the secrets within the level itself. itself. In the Pumpkin Serpent there is a witch's cauldron. I need a witch talisman to summon her, another item I don't have, so we'll be coming back here too. The boss fight itself is pretty simple. Dodge the projectiles from the giant pumpkin while throwing ranged attacks back at it. One graphical touch I really like is how the pumpkin begins to rot as you do more and more damage, and when you finally win, flowers bloom all around. However, this victory was pointless because you need the witch talisman for the kill to matter, so not only will I have to come back here, I will have to repeat this boss fight. Into the Sleeping Village, quite possibly one of the best levels in the game. Zarok has stolen the villagers' souls, but they're still innocent villagers, so despite the fact they are trying to kill you, you have to not attack them. Killing a villager actually lowers your chalice completion. Kill too many and you cannot get the chalice. This level is almost a condensed medieval experience, equal parts fantastic and infuriating. I love exploring the village. I hate how there's no minimap and camera control doesn't really help with navigation. I love that you need to find multiple items and combine them, and bring them together to solve a greater puzzle. I hate how this is the only level you have to do this on. In the library you find the cast of a crucifix, the first part of a multi-step puzzle. Oh, small side note, when you read books in-game, time freezes, so you can end up with comical moments like this. A frozen soulless villager just hovering, waiting to hit me once I'm done reading. Inside a few houses, you'll be chased by some townsfolk humming a far too jovial tune. If you did play this game, here's your nostalgia. Puzzle time. Push these barrels onto a button to open some gates and some doors, move between the bar and the basement, and spot the golden bust of a man on a pedestal. Push some more barrels, hit some switches, lower the pedestal, grab the bust, and get out of there. And now some half-French, half-Russian guards show up.
Hurry, comrades! Tear this place apart! If we don't find the shadow artifact, Lord Zarok will have us mocking out the demons for the next millennium!
These guys have guns, so close the distance quickly and then hack away. The church needs a golden crucifix. I have a golden bust and a mould. Wait, hang on, can I melt the gold into the cast? So I search around for a blacksmith and yes, I can. I use the mould and the cast on the furnace and then jump on the bellows to pump in air to heat the fire. Fantastic use of a location-specific puzzle using items you'd realistically find around this town. Use the cross in the church to unlock a hidden room to a key, then jump up some hay bales and over a rooftop, down a chimney, and use the key to unlock a safe which holds the shadow artifact, the item needed to open the demonic prison from the previous level. That's a lovely bit of design. And then I discover something small but adorable. If you hit your head, the impact is the sound of a hollow skull. The next chalice gets us the hammer, as useful as the club, but never breaks. Absolute game changer. It lets us break boulders too, so I can go back to the earlier levels and now push into all the secret areas without needing a club. I even find the secret witch's coven in Cemetery Hill, and a book tells me to light all the fires to call forth the witches. Okay, how do I light fires? Well, I guess the club still has some uses. The alternative attack on the club just holds it out in front of you, and you can then stick it into a fire, have it catch light, and then set other things on fire. This gets us the witch's talisman needed for other levels. I like how even though the hammer is an upgraded club, the club is still needed to transfer flames. I need more chalices, and this means taking on the super tough scarecrows. Thankfully, the hammer absolutely pummels them. The charge attack has an AoE knockback effect, so I'm pretty safe. Running through this level, however, I notice another issue. You cannot run and spin the camera at the same time. If you try, you'll get a little cannot move camera symbol to the bottom. Even if you're in an open camera control area, you cannot swing it around while running. I do like how Medieval is encouraging replay value, with weapons gained later being useful in the previous sections, and with items found later unlocking new paths in the earlier levels. I just wish it had explored that design a bit more. more. Having a level with 3 or 4 possible routes through it and endings depending on what you had, maybe moving between paths and having to return 4 or 5 times with new challenges each time, giving that feeling of novelty to the familiar. Another chalice gets us the broadsword, more damage, longer range. Next up, the Asylum Grounds, Zarok's hedge gardens ruled over by Jack of the Green, a riddle-giving taskmaster. Jack sets us 4 riddles and sends us off to find the answers before he'll let us through. The answer to the first is stars, and there are 5 stars around the open section. Now, there's no way to fail the riddles, you can just keep hitting things until you succeed, and when we are ambushed by a lot of angry ladies with pans, the new broadsword really earns its keep. The next riddle is annoying. There's a clown and you need to surround him with smiles, which means hitting these spinning faces until they all face inwards. But sometimes hitting a face makes the face adjacent move, sometimes it doesn't. Some are on timers and others aren't, so I set them all up 1 turn from done and then smack them all quickly. Another mechanic used only once. Here's my main issue with Medieval. It's not a bad game by a long shot, but it does feel like it's missed a lot of potential by not really mining the mechanics it has and working out how they can enhance each other. It definitely doesn't feel like the first draft of an idea, but it's not there yet. It's got moving platforms, it's got spinning corkscrews, riddles, find the items, then combine the items with the scenery games, it's got fighting sections and platform sections, it's got a lot of stuff, but it feels like they've added something and then moved on to the next thing instead of saying, right, what can this really be? We've got ideas A, B, and C, and we've got combat. How can we combine A, B, and C with combat together to create something truly special? A challenge where the player feels accomplished for combining multiple skills. Instead of doing that, it just forgets that A, B, and C exist, adds in a transition combat section, and then creates standalone mechanic D, E, and F. And I'm not exaggerating about the sheer amount of single-use mechanics. The next riddle needs me to lead a mouse across the gardens to an elephant while avoiding the prowling cats. And this is the only use of lead something past danger in the game. Push 3 flaming boxes into positions by the windows around this tomb and then get flown up and finally escape the maze, and then another puzzle. Another one-off mechanic, the chess puzzle. And what irritates me is they've clearly put effort into it, because you have to hit the pieces to make them move, because they're all coloured, so match the pieces with the correct square, but the chess pieces move correctly. The bishop only goes diagonally, the rook only goes in straight lines. This is a lovely bit of attention to detail, and yet never seen again. This one level has riddles, guiding NPCs, moving flaming boxes, and rearranging a chessboard. You could have made one hell of a puzzle by combining all of these things together. Next up, we fight through the Asylum, probably the most forgettable level. It's a wave defense level. Medieval is not a strong enough platformer to stand on platforming alone, and it's not a strong enough combat game to stand on fighting alone. It shines when all of its mechanics combine together. It's why the village level was so good. Running, jumping, collecting, avoiding combat, then fighting, mixing and solving puzzles. It's a great mixture of lots of stuff. This level relies entirely on combat to work, and it gets very old very quickly. You progress through 5 rooms of enemies, adding cannons, then bats, then those chasing zombies, then a donut-shaped room, and finally a lava river running through, which adds a single needed jump. Eventually, you rescue the captured town's mayor and find the first of 2 dragon gems, items we will need later. The chalice reward is this oddly flirty spear lady.
Dan, tell me, what's a warrior queen gotta do to meet someone like you? Don't be shy, baby. I've seen you giving me the eye. You may be weak and feeble like old men, but I like you, Daniel.
The spears themselves are ranged weapons which absolutely shred enemies. With the Witch's Talisman, we can return to the Enchanted Earth and activate the Witch's Cauldron. The Witch needs a favour. There's some magical amber in the nearby ant's nest and she needs it, so she shrinks us down and asks us to go and get it, and thus starts the worst part of the game. While in the ant's nest, you meet a captured fairy. They beg you to free their fairy brethren, so you set off into the ant tunnels, and these tunnels are awful. The worst map type in Medieval is anything hemmed zoomed in, close, because the camera can't work well, and with no map, these tunnels are not fun to explore. Everything looks the same. Navigation down here is awful, and you're collecting two types of items: amber for a witch you've just met, and freeing fairies you don't have a real reason to care about because you'll never see them again. They're basically irrelevant to the greater plot beyond this bit. The coolest aspect of the Ant's Nest is how you've got 3 coloured lights flying around you to act as ambient lighting, and the different coloured glow catches on all the cave walls and Daniel's model. It's really nice visually, and it's one of the better parts of being lost here for about 10 minutes. Eventually I find the Ant Queen boss at the end of the tunnel, similar to the Glass Demon but not quite as fun. Wait for the vulnerable moment, throw a lot of spears, and done. The fairy thanks us and sends us to the Hall of Heroes. Finishing the level this way counts as a chalice despite not collecting one, and we get a longbow. The shadow artifact we got earlier opens up the Shadow Demon prison, so we jump in, and I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure why we've done this. We've been told that even Zarok couldn't free these demons if he wanted to, and he does want to. I think this is the moment the game starts to descend into video game logic. Free the demons from the cage because of plot. This is also one of the more annoying puzzles. There are 4 buttons around this central cage, and there are 4 symbols on the wall, so you clearly have to push the buttons in order, but what order? Which symbol do I start at? Am I going clockwise or anti-clockwise? Honestly, I solved this puzzle by trial and error. And when you do open the cage, powerful demons fly out. Warning, this is the actual scene used in the game, and it features a flashing strobe light effect. Anyone sensitive to strobing effects, please look away now. Strobe over, you can look back now. With the demons free, you can actually fight them. They are substantially tougher than regular enemies, and the only way to get the chalice on this level is to kill almost all of them. I need to get past these red lasers, so I stick an icon into this wall recess and go and grab the final rune, and then get thrown into a rather unexpected boss fight with a rather unfair mechanic. The platform you're on starts moving up, and 2 flying demons begin to attack you, throwing projectiles, dropping rocks, and then tilting the platform so you slide off the edge. And even if you're standing in the middle, the tilt is so extreme you can still slip straight off. Even if you start running the other way, you'll still fall. This fight is brutal, and it's at the end of the level after the demon puzzle, so if you do die, and you will, you'll need to reload, and it's a real trek to get back here. I don't mind fair deaths that are my fault because I didn't read mechanics correctly, but this platform, this isn't fair. And of course, the whole tilting floor mechanic is only used here. Another one and done. Take the demons down, grab another chalice, and get an axe. What accents do you have, Mr. Axeman?
Hey, Mr. Fortesque, I want to talk with you. If this Zorak's so bad, why'd you get to go back? Why'd you of all people, Fortesque? It should be I, Blood Monatha Skull Cleaver. When I lived, always I had a pile of slain strewn around me. You spend most of your time organizing and changing of the guard and playing croquet with the king.
Next up, Pools of the Ancient Dead, this level. It's a big open swamp, and this book tells us weapons are useless against the knights in armour, so we should avoid them, but this isn't entirely true. In the swamp, we meet the ferryman. They need a favour. If we can find 8 lost souls, they'll ferry us across the river, so we go and find 8 lost souls represented by floating helmets. Look, the second half of Medieval is weaker than the first half. It loses the main thread of what made it so strong in the Graveyard, a relatable scenario and tongue-in-cheek humour. The first 4 levels, Graveyard, Hill, Mausoleum and Stained Glass Demon, and then returning to the Graveyard to use the key you got, was such a perfect quadrilogy of mechanics, good platforming, enough combat to be engaging, and memorable set pieces, leading to a balanced boss fight with a consistent plot. And after that, the town was a great standalone level, and now it feels very, what's the next idea? What mechanic can we now add? What environment could we go to next? It does indeed have great variety in areas and level layout, but it feels it lost the tight narrative focus of the opening. We get chased down a cliff by some chariots and then ambushed by a group, and we have to fight back. Now, weapons are indeed useless, but the hammer's AoE smash knocks enemies away, so we can slowly but surely just knock everyone off the cliff. I do, however, fall into the swamp an embarrassing amount of times and have to restart this level a lot. Find all the lost souls, knock enough knights into the swamp to fill another chalice and go and get the next weapon. The longbow now has flaming arrows. Next level, the lake. The ferryman rows us in, and we are told, use stealth. So I use stealth. Turns out I am not very stealthy. Here's my problem with the game suggesting stealth. There are no stealth mechanics. There's nothing which actually encourages you to be stealthy. There's no way to measure it. There's no radar or minimap or noise meter or hide mechanics. The suggestion be stealthy isn't backed up by anything you as a player can actually do. What they meant was, these eyeballs in town will shoot tears at you if you stand in front of them. Try to avoid them. But seeing as this game came out in 1998, the same year as Metal Gear Solid, a shoehorned-in suggestion of stealth with no mechanics attached to it probably wasn't the wisest of choices. Another example of Medieval constantly adding in new things instead of refining what they already have. Here's a nice touch. You get to freeze this giant whirlpool. That means finding 3 runes around the level, then carefully walking around this thin walkway to the freezing machines. While you're doing this, enemies will jump out of the water and ambush you, sometimes knocking you off. This is a nice combination of item collecting, careful platforming, and controlled combat. I am noticing some asset reuse, however. The freezing machines are giant retextured pumpkins with crystals stuck on top. When the vortex freezes, super cool set piece. You get to jump in and slide down and then run through an underwater ice tunnel. My only question is, why are there elephants underwater? I know the whole aesthetic was based off Tim Burton, but this still struck me as odd. These never appear again. They're just underwater, swimming, psychedelic elephants. Grab the star rune, open the final door, and we are off to the Crystal Caves. Thin paths, bottomless instant death falls, and flying enemies with ranged attacks trying to knock you off, and then another enemy type.
The ancient town of Mellowmead was destroyed by creatures known as Rhinotaurs. They live on still, but in a state of hibernation, deep within these caverns. They use the crystals to prolong their worthless hides.
Rhinotaurs. Hybrid Rhino-Minotaur. Now, when you design something by smashing 2 things together, usually you want to use the unique elements of both to create something new. Rhinos are known for charging forwards, Minotaurs are known for being in labyrinths. So are we going to have to navigate a labyrinth while dodging a charging rhino? Because honestly, that sounds like quite a fun mechanic. No. It's just an enemy with an axe in a crystal cave, same as all the other ground-based enemies, just hit them a lot. Fighting them is no different to fighting the shadow demons. A spinning crystal searchlight. Avoid the beams or take damage. Grab the rune it's defending. Of course, this is the only time this design is used. Hop through the waterfall and find a dragon's hoard, a stash of golden health potions. Unfortunately, I need both dragon gems to unlock the boss here, and I only have 1 right now. Finish the crystal cave, grab another chalice. Okay, did they just hire one actor who promised he could do every accent?
Ah, Herr Fortescue, you are back on the battlefield, yeah? This is good. People say to me, Sturmgard, what do you think of this sword or that axe? But I say to them, nein! Modern warfare is a question of science, the science of shields!
The next level, the Gallows Gauntlet, with some of the more disturbing enemy designs. These guys, who were impaled on giant spikes, run at you using the spike through their torso as a lance. And you can use your shield to block, but their attack hits repeatedly and will chew through your defense. Even the golden shield from the German knight can't stand up for long. They remind me of the skeleton wheels from Dark Souls. And then you've got these actual hanged men swinging from the gallows. The wooden frame of the gallows walking and then jumping towards you. Now, early on in this cave, we find an exit, and it says if you don't have the item needed to progress, you can leave here. It seems I need the dragon armor to pass through this fiery dragon flame gate, and that means finding both dragon gems first, so it's time to backtrack. Remember the witch's talisman we found? Well, back on the pumpkin boss level there is a cauldron. Summon the witch and she asks you to kill the pumpkin king again, and when you do, she gives you the second dragon gem. Stick both gems into the dragon face relief in the hidden waterfall cave and we get another boss and another questionable accent.
Dares to enter my lair and wake me from my slumber. Aha! Prepare yourself, little man. I shall roast the flesh from your bones. Oh, I see. Well, in that case, I will pluck out both your eyes. Oh, great. I'm just gonna give you a good hiding.
This dragon fight is quite nice. If you read the book, you get told the only thing the dragon is worried about is falling rocks, and if you smash your hammer on the ground, you'll make rocks fall, but only on the platform to the right of you. There are 4 platforms on various levels and a gap between them, and the dragon will poke his head out and breathe fire from one of the 4 tunnels. So you are hopping around, hitting the floor and dodging the flames, and as much fun as this is, I think we all know by now it's going to be another single-use design. Defeat the dragon and grab the magical potion which now grants us the dragon form, a new updated armor look, and our head is now a dragon head and you breathe fire. So we can go back through the gauntlet and pass the flame barrier. It's a shame there weren't more flame barriers in previous levels, meaning this could have opened up even more paths. And now a rather unfair enemy design. Remember the spirit snake dragon thing we freed from a chest who attacked enemies for us back on the farm? Well, collecting the final rune here unleashes the actual thing, but this time it attacks us, and you cannot outrun it. So you need to sprint, jump, block, and pray that you have enough health as you try to finish the level without being bound by this spirit. It would be quite nice if they had a callback to the rocks fall mechanic as a way to stun it, but no, it's just a runaway bit. Into the haunted ruins, the bridge is up, and you need to herd some chickens to eat a pile of grain which is weighing down a button, and when the grain is gone, the bridge lowers. I suppose this is similar to the leader rat past some angry cats mechanic, but that was an NPC following you, and this is an NPC running away from you. This mechanic of use hungry NPCs to eat something is, again, only used here. Into Castle Peregrine, the castle of the human king. There are farmers being held captive, strung up above some fire, and we need to kill the demons before they put the farmers to death. Have no fear, farmers, I will save you. Right, they all died. Well, better luck next time. This castle is a big puzzle, almost a 3D maze. We need to turn off some oil vats, find some runes, open some gates, dodge some cannons, and kill some demons, and this is the exact level which plays to the game's strengths. Lots of tightly knit mechanics all flowing into each other with decent sightlines and a relatively easy to navigate layout. But then you've got issues like this. A random camera angle reset if you approach this wall this way. This level isn't sectioned off, there are no loading screens, but if you run onto this rampart from this exact angle, the camera cuts to black and then repositions itself. Don't know why. Hey, we need to get past some flames. Time for the dragon potion. I like this. They have reused a previous mechanic. That is progression. We're told the king's ghost wanders the halls, and if we could find his crown, maybe we can summon him. So we fall through a trapdoor and instantly find the crown. Summon the king and he says this castle was built on an active volcano. We need to open the volcano gates and destroy the castle to kill all the demons within. This means fighting some golems by pushing them off the map via the hammer shockwave, and then running through the level in a timed section avoiding the lava. To escape, you'll find a catapult. Hop in and fling yourself over the wall. And this leads us to probably the strangest level, one which, while fun, makes the least narrative sense. The ghost ship. The level starts with a CGI cutscene showing Daniel walking through a forest and then being chased by a dinosaur. So we run away, but we reach a sheer cliff face. Before we can leap off, a giant eagle swoops down and picks us up, flies us through the air, and then drops us onto a pirate ship. I am convinced the designers just really wanted an airship level and couldn't think of a sensible way to travel there, so just threw in a random dinosaur and eagle transition. The level itself is nicely compact. It has a side-scrolling feel to it as the journey on the ship moves us from the left to the right through various mechanics. We are told the pirate enemies are controlled by a captain, and if we kill the officers, the smaller mobs will die. This is a nice idea. However, it's not the only way to kill the mobs. You can just kill them as normal, and the officers run away and the mobs need to be killed so you don't die while chasing the officers. It's an interesting mechanic, but again, not fully explored or required. It only appears once and never really gets used in a more complex way to actually affect any real decisions, which seems pretty par for the course so far. If you fall through this trapdoor grid, you don't die. You land in the hold and have to fight your way through, which is a nice way to do puzzles. No failure, just repeated attempts. And then the first use of bouncy floors, flinging you into the air. This rigging is a trampoline. Medieval is a platform game that only introduces bouncy floors at the very end of the game, and then uses them exactly twice. Run along the side of the ship and jump across the raising doors of the cannon firing windows, fight past more pirates, and then take on quite a difficult boss. The pirate captain paces back and forth. You need to kill the minions, which respawn, and then light your club and fire the cannons to hit the pacing boss. But the cannons do not hit the boss at the extreme left or right of their pacing route. They hit them just before the end. So the best best way to aim your shot is to not aim. Just spin around and spam cannonballs until it dies. And now the green sparkly issue. Remember the green sparkles at the end of the level? They were given an in-universe reason to be there, a narrative connection. They were the trail of energy left by Zarok as he swept across the land, and that is why we're following them. But Zarok has not been on the ghost ship, and yet it still has sparkles. Now you might think I'm being pedantic, but I think this small oversight highlights the issue with the end of Medieval. It's forgotten the tight narrative it had about mistaken valor and redemption, and now it's just become a video game. The final few levels feel very disconnected from the start of the adventure. The green sparkles are no longer chase Zarok, they are now okay, next level. The Chalice reward is a magical longbow with an exploding area of effect attack. Onward to the final few levels. First up, the entrance hall. We are finally breaching Zarok's castle. Unfortunately, Zarok isn't home, but a small army of imps is. We are told the imps have magical shields, so we can't harm them, but this is wrong because the explosion from the magic longbow works just fine. There is nothing unique on this level. It's just fight through a sanctum. I do appreciate how we get to fight through the same location that we saw in the opening cinematic. I like it when the game ties the CGI cutscenes and the gameplay together like this. And I appreciate the humour in this magical book. Contents: raising the dead, putting a town to sleep, looking good for the over 400s, robbing people of their free will, summoning demons, card tricks. This level is super short, and honestly you could just remove it from the game and lose nothing. The Hall of Heroes reward continues our journey of fascinating accents.
Alright then, man. How you doing? Now then, have you got yourself a magic sword? What? Daniel, man, you can't go into battle against an army of undead without a magic sword. Here, take mine. You'll never have to sharpen another blade, or my name's not Dirk Steadfast. It's not enough just to have a magic shield, you know, no matter what that soft ticky stern card says.
We finally have the magic sword, the best weapon in the game, no reason to ever use anything else except maybe the magical arrows. On to the penultimate level, the time device, and another bizarre aesthetic choice. From Zarok's lair we fall into a massive underground facility surrounded by a train track, and we are told Zarok has been using a super evil version of magic known as science to create a time machine and a train. This level has bouncy brains and flying clocks, open spaces, thin platforms, the French riflemen are back, there's swinging pendulums to dodge and hazards on the floor. In fact, to progress, you get shown time code based locks and then have to jump on the buttons of a big clock to set the hands to the correct time. And then you've got transport tubes and red laser grids and timed runs, and there's a lot going on here. So with so many mechanics, why doesn't this level work? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, Zarok using science has never been hinted at. So the revelation that he's actually a mad scientist and not a sorcerer seems to come from nowhere. It also gets immediately forgotten when you fight him as a boss. And the mechanics, well, this is another example of quantity over quality. There's a lot of stuff here, but none of it combines. All the mechanics feel separate and spaced apart instead of coming together into a new challenge, and the camera just absolutely does not know what to do in this level. It clips under the floor and behind the foreground constantly. Eventually we find the train turntable. You can push the table and spin it to send the train down different tracks, and each track is a straight line to another area. Find a rune, unlock a door, ride the train in a straight line to another rune. This is honestly the least exciting and most disappointing use of a train mechanic. You could have smashed through walls or run over enemies, gone through fire. You could have used switches and puzzles to change the track and jump over the walls, but no, it's just a straight line. So we grab all the runes, ride the train to the final level and take on Zarok. The Chalice reward is lightning. We'll get to use this in a moment. Time for the final showdown with Zarok. We pull up to his lair in the train and the whole time travel science plot is instantly abandoned. So we run into the arena and place the chalice in the centre, and now we are aided by all the souls we have rescued. And the final level is, of course, a one-off gimmick mechanic. Zarok summons an army, and we then rally an army from the people who still support us, and they clash, and you get to watch. You can't harm the evil undead, but you can heal your own good undead. To do this, you need to find the chest behind you and get the weapon Good Lightning. Using this drains your own health but refills your soldiers' health. You can tell how damaged your soldiers are by their colour. Green is fine, then through orange, and finally red is nearly dead. The whole process is quite difficult because you cannot harm the enemy yourself. You need to heal your own soldiers and hope they win, but if you heal too much, you drain your own health and die. Now there are 2 health fonts in this arena, but the time it takes you to run to them and refill, your soldiers will have been killed. So if you start this level with low health, you physically cannot finish it, because you cannot put out enough healing quick enough to not die. I need to quit the game, grind for health and return when fully stocked. And when your dudes finally do win, they explode into health potions, but the camera now does a really strange thing. The camera focuses on the exploding skeletons, but this is not a cutscene. You can still run around. Indeed, you have to run around to get the potions they've turned into, because they disappear once the scene is done. But the camera keeps moving from skeleton to skeleton, and Daniel ends up off screen, so you just have to hope you're running the right way. With the army defeated, Zarok summons his commander Kardok, an undead knight on a skeleton steed. He's got some charging attacks, but this is the time you get to use your lightning. Run around and smack him with lightning. If you didn't get the lightning, your magic sword will do too. This is pretty simple, and with Kardok killed, Zarok casts a magical spell to turn himself into a giant mecha clown dragon. I'm not kidding.
Bugger. Right then, that's it. I've just about had enough of your meddling. Where is that spell? Ah, yes. No, not that spell. Oh. Oh, not right now. Aha! Now I have it. None shall defeat the mighty Zarok. So prepare to die, Fortescue.
The fight is pretty underwhelming, honestly, especially with a time machine set up and then immediately abandoned. You cannot harm Zarok through the magical blue shield, so run around until he raises up onto both back legs, then get a hit in and then back to running. Avoid the electrical spider-style walking attack when his health gets low. It's a shame you had the shielded imps in Zarok's lair and a shielded Zarok and no connecting mechanic. Perfect example of how you could have combined 2 levels and situations to make the player feel clever. Finally, Zarok goes down and we get the ending cutscene.
Ah, curse you, Sir Knight. I am finally defeated. Yet if I am to fail, then all shall perish. You are doomed, Fortescue. You will never leave this domain.
We escape the exploding factory by riding a giant clock gear. The eagle then grabs us and flies us to safety. We see the souls of the townspeople being restored, and then we go back to sleep in our own crypt. Finishing the game took me about 8 hours, so now it's done, we can ask Medieval, was it actually any good? Medieval feels like one of those games that absolutely everyone remembers playing, and this is likely because of how pushed the demo versions were. It's just a shame that the demo levels, the first 4, were some of the best designed bits. Medieval is many things: a platformer, a combat game, a puzzler, a tongue-in-cheek, humorous story, but it does none of those things well enough to stand on the benefits of them alone. It survives from the way it combines aspects of all of them into a better gaming experience, and the harsh truth is it just doesn't combine them as well as it could have done. It introduces a new mechanic and then drops it before exploring what its inclusion could really mean to the game as a whole, only to then introduce another and then drop it, repeat until literally the last level. Its design reminds me of the Borromean rings, a drawing of 3 rings all interlocked together yet not actually linked together in any way. While all 3 rings are there, they are connected and stable, but remove any individual ring and all the others would fall away. Medieval combines its design elements in this exact way: platforming, combat, and story. Enjoyable enough when all combined, but not capable of standing up if a single one of them was removed. The camera isn't tight enough and the movement isn't accurate enough to give the player the control they need to support more difficult platforming sections, so the platforming relies on the combat to make it hard. The combat isn't varied enough to feel different level to level, so it relies on the platforming and the story to keep the combat experiences relevant. And the story and setting starts strong and then forgets itself to focus on the spectacle of level design instead of anything relating to Daniel's redemption and Zarok's dominance. So the story relies on your experience of the platforming sections and combat sections to be interesting. It's a game which thrives on how it combines different aspects of itself together, and when you replay it you realise it's missed so many chances to do it better. It's a collection of ideas presented on their own and then forgotten, not combined into a greater experience. It's not a bad game, but it is a game that could have done so much more with what it had. So to end the review, I will award Medieval.
You know, I've always had my doubts about you, Fortescue. You're just not carved from hero material.
Out of 10. Cheers for watching. Another massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive and allow me to make longer form videos like this one. You can support from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter and our Discord. And as always, remember...